It all started with $43 million. That kind of money changes everything. It changed her. It turned a simple car crash into an attempted murder. They thought I was dead. They grieved for me. They even moved on, right into my house. The air in the upscale Italian restaurant was warm, scented with basil and expensive wine. I sat quietly at a corner table, shielded by the large menu. I watched as Lorelei, my beautiful, grieving widow, raised a toast to the man sitting beside her. "To Ashton," she said, her voice dripping with affection. "The only person who truly understands me." Ashton, Lorelei's brand-new husband, looked across the room, and his eyes, his terrified, bloodshot eyes, met mine. The champagne flute slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor with a sound that ripped through the polite dinner conversation. He didn't just gasp, he let out a guttural, choked scream that silenced the entire restaurant. I stood up, walked slowly toward their table, and rested a hand on Ashton's shoulder. "You look like you've seen a ghost, Ashton. Did you really think I was dead?" That look on his face, my wife's new husband, when he saw a ghost walk through the door, that was the best part of the whole inheritance. But they forgot one very important thing. I didn't die, and that wasn't where it started. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and drop where you're watching from, because what comes next, you won't believe how brutally justice turned the tables. My name is Caspian Hayes. I'm 38, and until recently, my life was beautifully ordinary. I worked as a structural engineer, methodical, dependable, and comfortable. My wife Lorelei was a talented interior designer. The bedrock of our 7-year marriage was a shared dream of building something from nothing. We didn't have much money, but we had a solid plan. The single dramatic shift in our world happened 5 years ago when my uncle Silas passed away. Silas was a reclusive tech investor. His will stipulated that his entire estate, valued at $43 million, upgraded from the original $13 million due to market growth, would be held in a trust for 5 years. If I was married and debt-free at the end of that period, it was all mine. The inheritance immediately transformed Lorelei. She quit her job, hired an assistant, and her ambition became focused solely on the countdown. She always said secrets protect people. She was wrong. They only protect the person keeping them. Lorelei introduced me to Ashton Thorne a few months later. Ashton was a smooth-talking stockbroker, charismatic, overly attentive to Lorelei, and immediately unsettling. He became Lorelei's new financial advisor and, quickly, my constant shadow. I tolerated him because the $43 million was almost within reach. Lorelei's behavior became extreme. She managed my schedule, monitored my communications, and insisted we do absolutely nothing risky. She protected me like I was a priceless antique. I now realize she wasn't protecting me. She was protecting the trust maturity date. The trust matured on a Tuesday. The funds were legally mine. We celebrated with an elaborate, expensive dinner planned entirely by Lorelei and Ashton. The very next morning, the betrayal began. Lorelei insisted on driving me to the bank to finalize the transfer of the funds. Ashton was following closely behind us in his black SUV, citing security concerns for the massive transfer. We drove down a remote stretch of coastal highway. Lorelei slowed down near a sharp, blind curve overlooking a steep, rocky ravine. "Kaz, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice strangely flat. She didn't answer. Instead, she unbuckled her belt, turned the steering wheel sharply, violently, and slid across the seat out the missing passenger door, sending the car careening toward the edge. I didn't have time to process the shock before the car plunged over the embankment. The sound of the car tumbling was a sickening, grinding roar of metal and earth. Dramatic slow-motion shot of the car spinning over the cliff edge. The screen momentarily fades to black. I woke up hours later, trapped beneath the wreckage. The vehicle was upside down and water was slowly filling the cabin. The front end was shattered, but I was miraculously alive. Lorelei was gone. Her side of the car was completely empty, her seatbelt cut, not destroyed by the crash,
but removed beforehand. Then I saw Ashton's face peering down the ravine from the road above. He wasn't panicked. He was smirking. He raised his hand and gave a small, casual wave before turning and walking back up the incline. I realized then, she hadn't driven us off the road. She had abandoned us before the car even went over. It was a carefully orchestrated execution, timed precisely after the trust money became mine. I managed to drag myself from the wreckage, driven by a rage so cold it negated the pain. I found a remote hiking trail and stumbled toward help, leaving the wreckage and my identity behind. I spent the next 3 days recovering in a remote cabin, watching the news. My car was found, my body was presumed lost at sea. They showed a picture of Lorelei weeping at a makeshift memorial. Ashton was holding her tightly. That was the night I realized they weren't just thieves, they were murderers. And that was the night I stopped trusting and started planning. I was officially dead, and I knew exactly how to use my new status. My first priority was survival and absolute silence. I had to let them secure the money and believe they were safe. I contacted an old friend, Dominic, a private investigator who owed me a major favor. I told him the bare minimum. I was alive, and they tried to kill me for the inheritance. "I need you to confirm 3 things, Dom," I whispered over a burner phone. "Did the $43 million inheritance transfer to Lorelei? Did the $2 million life insurance policy pay out? And are they connected to that crash site?" Within a week, Dominic delivered. The inheritance was transferred to Lorelei as the surviving spouse. The life insurance also paid out, and the local police considered the crash an open and shut case. I started documenting my life from the shadows. I used my skills as a structural engineer, my professional knowledge revealed, to study the crash scene photographs and police reports Dominic provided. I noticed the skid marks and the impact geometry. The damage was inconsistent with a simple loss of control. It was consistent with an initial lateral push, Lorelei's calculated shove of the steering wheel, followed by the car being pushed from behind. The missing passenger door was the final confirmation of her planning. The accidental discovery of additional betrayal came from Dominic's report on Ashton. Ashton was a heavy gambler with massive undeclared debts. The reason for the murder wasn't just the inheritance. It was the $2 million life insurance money that Ashton desperately needed immediately to cover his bookie debt. Lorelei was complicit, but Ashton was the immediate driver of the violence. The symbolic object became a small, rusted pocket knife Dominic recovered from a police evidence photo of the crash site. The knife used to cut Lorelei's seatbelt before the car plunged. It was proof she was never in danger. By the time I was done gathering evidence, I had enough to prove the murder was premeditated, financially motivated, and involved insurance fraud. Enough to trigger a criminal indictment. But that wasn't enough. I wanted them to realize their perfect crime had been witnessed by their victim, and I wanted to hit them where it hurt most: the money.
My master plan was to reverse the entire script, legally invalidate the grounds for the inheritance and the insurance, and then expose their crime. I needed to secure my identity before revealing myself. I spent 2 months working with Dominic to establish a completely new, untraceable persona: Conrad Sterling, an investment consultant. This allowed me to legally open accounts and begin the process of challenging the estate without revealing Caspian Hayes was alive. I hired a sharp, discreet probate attorney, Audrey, who specialized in trust disputes. Audrey filed a highly unusual anonymous petition to freeze the assets of the late Caspian Hayes, citing compelling evidence of fraud and undue influence in the distribution of the insurance and inheritance funds. The first consequence was delivered when Lorelei and Ashton's bank accounts were frozen. I decided to increase the psychological pressure. I sent Lorelei a single, anonymous photograph, a high-quality picture of the ravine where they left me, printed on expensive paper. The photograph contained a small, almost invisible detail: my reflection in a puddle near the wreckage. Caspian, now Conrad, begins the terror campaign. Lorelei and Ashton were hysterical. They believed I was a ghost watching them. I orchestrated the final stage. I had Audrey schedule a mandatory settlement hearing in a closed probate court. Lorelei and Ashton were legally compelled to attend. I, as Conrad Sterling, the legal representative of the mysterious petitioning entity, was scheduled to attend as well. They thought they were dealing with a legal phantom. They were about to learn they had messed with their supposed victim. I dressed impeccably for the probate hearing. I was fully healed, professionally composed. I watched Lorelei and Ashton walk in, tense and furious about their frozen millions. The climax was set to take place in a neutral courtroom. Audrey started the hearing by calmly presenting the financial arguments for freezing the $45 million total estate, citing Ashton's undeclared gambling debts as the motive for the fraudulent life insurance claim. Lorelei's lawyer confidently dismissed the evidence, claiming the petitioners were fabricating facts. "Your Honor," Audrey said, "the petition can only be resolved if the primary witness confirms the events of the day of the alleged death." Audrey looked at me. I walked to the front of the courtroom, resting my hands on the railing. I had a microphone turned down low for the recording. "I am Caspian Hayes. I am the deceased," I stated, my voice echoing clearly through the small courtroom. The effect was instantaneous. Lorelei screamed. Ashton collapsed, clutching his chest. The court recessed immediately amidst the chaos. Lorelei and Ashton were taken away by paramedics and then by local law enforcement, who had been waiting outside, tipped off by Dominic. They were immediately charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and insurance fraud. The final confrontation happened a week later. Lorelei was released on bail. I met Lorelei at a small, neutral law office. "Why, Lorelei?" I asked. She looked at me, her tears genuine, but not for me. "The pressure, Cass. I told Ashton we could wait, but he needed the insurance money now. He said if you died, the trust money would still be ours. He planned the whole thing. I just went along with it." "You went along with my murder," I corrected. "I thought I loved him more than the money, but he made me feel special. You didn't." I stood up. "I bought you a house, Lori. I built a life with you. He bought you lies, and you paid for it with my life." I walked out, leaving her to face the full consequences alone. I had been Caspian Hayes, the structural engineer. Now I was Conrad Sterling, the quiet orchestrator of justice. The $45 million was returned to the estate. After legal fees and tax implications, it was legally mine, secured under my new identity. Justice fully served. I used my new identity and my old fortune to invest in infrastructure projects. I rebuilt my career, my life, and my sense of self-worth. I learned that true fortune isn't measured in millions, but in the integrity of the people you choose to trust. Lorelei and Ashton taught me the hard lesson that the most dangerous lie is the one you tell yourself. Revenge doesn't fix pain, it measures it. It validated that my life was worth more than their greed. If you enjoyed seeing murderous cheats get what they deserved, you'll love my next story about a sister who discovered her business partner, who was her own sibling, had been stealing from their family company for years. Smash that subscribe button if you believe justice always finds its way. What's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? Share in the comments. What would you have done if they thought you were dead?